Hello and welcome back to Movie Husbands. This is our top 10 films of 2023. So if you've seen our top 10 videos before, welcome back. If not, basically what Jeffrey and I have are our own individual lists of our top 10 favorite movies of the year. Keep in mind that there is a few films that we have not unfortunately seen due to either certain circumstances. I know there's a lot of films that are really high rated that we just haven't seen, like Godzilla -1. I know that's getting on a lot of people's lists.
Unfortunately, some of the documentary selections and some of the foreign films have not come out yet. So namely Perfect Days, The Taste of Things. There is also a kind of buzzy movie called Don't Expect Too Much from the End of the World. I haven't seen that. I will say that out of what was available, we're ahead of the game because we went to a film festival this year. We have seen the most movies at this point in time that we ever have making our list.
Yeah, this was certainly our biggest year yet. So.
Yeah, I mean, we look at who's favored to be nominated for Oscars and who's in the top 10 list, and there's very few films that I haven't seen.
Yeah, and the fun thing I enjoy so much about this video is that we do not talk about our top 10 list in advance. So
which is so annoying because I literally have no idea what's on Matt's list at all. And I think that I'm a little more upfront about what my favorite movie of the year has been, at least up until a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Because I just wouldn't stop talking about it. And meanwhile, you've been much more close to the chest. So I'm very interested to see how things shake out.
You have been probing me and you haven't been getting anywhere. So I am very excited to see if you are shocked or surprised by anything on my list, and likewise as well. But usually what we get started with is honorable mentions, movies that we wish could have made our top 10, but alas did not. It's not that they weren't good enough. They were really good.
I had a list of 22 films that I whittled down to 10. Number 22 all the way to number 8 were movies that I gave 4 stars on Letterboxd, which is interesting because to me, 4 stars means either a B+ or an A-. So that shows you how close all of these rankings were, that I had to really think about what were my favorite films of the year, even though they're in such close contact with each other and from a rating standpoint.
So do you want to get started with your honorable mentions?
I went first last year, so I think you should go first this year.
Okay. I'm happy to go first. I have as my honorable mentions Dream Scenario, Passages, Shada, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, Across the Spider-Verse, The Boy and the Heron, You Hurt My Feelings, Maestro, and The Holdovers.
Can I say something quick about The Holdovers?
Yes.
This movie is like the definition of an honorable mention, just because it's really good, it's really sweet, it's well written, it's well acted, everything about it is really good, especially in a year like this that there's so many exemplary films out there that you want to highlight. It's just like bound to be an honorable mention, but I felt the same way. I felt like that would be a top 10 film in another year.
And I do want to say, on terms of my honorable mentions, I think Shada is my most overlooked movie.
Shada is definitely a film that should have had quite a bit more buzz than it did. All right, so my honorable mentions are Ferrari, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, Maestro, Poor Things, Barbie, Past Lives, Talk to Me, Showing Up, Godland, The Holdovers, A Fire, and Shada.
Yeah, I'm most surprised by Talk to Me.
Yeah, I really like Talk to Me. There's actually a horror movie that I like better that made my list.
Oh, okay. Well, I can't wait to hear about that because I certainly did not see it.
No, you didn't. This one is nasty.
Oh.
Yeah, it's gross.
So going into our top 10, my number 10 film of the year was John Wick, Chapter 4. This film was just an absolute blast from beginning to end. I thought the stunt work was just absolutely second to none, and I thought it was such a great vehicle for so many of these absolutely fantastic scenes, including a car chase sequence around the iconic Arc de Triomphe in Paris, an astonishing one-take fight scene through multiple rooms with gravity-defying camera work, and a staircase fight sequence at the climax of the film, which in theory seems so simplistic, but it was filled with so much detail and fight work that was just so cool and very funny, by the way.
Movie absolutely rules. And that staircase fight sequence is really funny. It has a way of starting over for people that have not seen the film. The fact that they were audacious enough to do that twice, I think, is hilarious. My number 10 is a film called Rotting in the Sun, which this was a sleeper I checked out pretty late in the year. It's effectively about this very depressed, drug-addicted artist and filmmaker named Sebastian. The film is directed by Sebastian Silva, so he's ostensibly playing himself in the film. And he meets Instagram comedian Jordan Firstman, who is also a real person apparently, but somebody that I was not familiar with before this film. What follows is a very surprising, very hyper-dark thriller comedy hybrid, but the humor is pitch black. I mean, there's jokes about suicide suicidal ideation. There's jokes about class and privilege. And there's also this nail-biting suspense and a pretty, very interesting twist that happens halfway through, which is why I hesitate to tell you anything about why this movie becomes a thriller. Sometimes in the same scenes, you see social media superficiality happening in the film's background, while in the film's foreground, there are all these moments of dramatic irony relating to the thrilling aspect of the film. All of its tones kind of collide at once, and it's done really brilliantly. It won't be for everybody, but it's a very ballsy watch, and I think a very interesting film. Also, you will never be more annoyed with a human being that uses their phone to translate things in foreign countries.
Oh my God,
it's
we've done that.
Super annoying. Yeah, we do that all the time. And after this movie, it's going to be very difficult to do it again.
Especially the feature on your phone where you can put up the photo of the camera and it could retranslate what you're writing.
Well, that's kind of what he's doing. He's like this loud American who's screaming into his phone and it translates it into Spanish.
God, I don't do that.
Oh, okay.
Thank God.
Yeah. At first it's funny, then it becomes annoying, and then it adds to the film's like overall just intensity. So this is streaming on Mubi. Please check it out. It is way under the radar and a great film.
Well, moving on from thriller comedy hybrid
drug-addled depressed
people, we are going to go to alcoholic depressed people with my number 9 film, Fallen Leaves, which is a romantic comedy if you're not familiar with it. I just thought this film was absolutely delightful and vibey. It's a film that so perfectly deflects from the common romantic comedy tropes, which makes it feel both unexpected but also really grounded. It avoids so much of this emotional sensationalism that I find that a lot of American romantic comedies fall into.
Great director here, Aki Kaurismäki, and I felt like this really summarized his career and almost whittled it down into 85 minutes of what his whole perception of film is about. And I really enjoyed this film. I will say it's not on my top 10 or my honorable mentions, although I do really, really like this film.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
Well, it's great. I like it.
Honorable mention. Wow.
My number 9 is a film called When Evil Lurks. It is a viscerally violent and quite intense horror movie.
This is the horror movie you're talking about.
Yes. Quite breakneck pacing. It is on Shudder for anyone who's interested in seeing it. I think gore sometimes gets a bad rap in horror films, especially due to films that really bastardized it, like Saw or the Hostel franchise. Those films certainly have some gratuitous violence that's really unnecessary, but mainly horror films are meant to be horrifying, and if you can do that through violence, especially something that reflects our real world instances, sometimes that can be the easiest avenue to horrify somebody. It has violence that's not salacious at all, but especially in a society that's as desensitized as ours, it's a strong feat to be able to accomplish something that someone finds disturbing. And the dread and suspense in this film really suffocates its viewers. It's wild. It is the most eagerly tense I was, I think, all year long, and I kept noticing that I kept using the word tense and tension for a lot of the films that I put on my list, which kind of tells you about my taste, but it was a very difficult sit, but it was just true masterclass horror filmmaking, and it's the only horror film on my list this year.
So my number 8 film is a film I'm excited to talk about because it is a film that you haven't seen, and that is Asteroid City. I think in true Wes Anderson fashion, Asteroid City is as stylistic and visually creative as much of his filmography. However, compared to his most recent work, I would say The French Dispatch included, I found it to be so much more refined, centered, and grounded, even for all of its complexity. So this film basically is a film within a play. Mm-hmm. Or a play within a play, I guess you would say, because the play is being filmed.
Yeah, he loves doing this shit.
Yeah. Anderson's affinity for every character acting with this deadpan humor somehow makes more sense in this film than his recent outings. Jokes that become running gags throughout the film, such as 3 young daughters who believe they're witches, and vending machines that claim you could buy property on site. So...
That sounds funny.
It is. The film cast in this movie truly feels like an ensemble. Everyone is connecting, conversing in ways that make it feel like a small village. Best of all, within all this absurdity lies what I found to be something emotionally moving with reflections of grief and the overwhelming nature of life. And these are characteristics that I typically don't really get from too much of Wes Anderson movies, or I find hard to connect with.
I don't dislike Wes Anderson necessarily, but I have found his later output to be not quite as good as his early output. I showed you The Royal Tenenbaums on Christmas. I absolutely love that film. I love Bottle Rocket. I love Rushmore. Oh my gosh, we have to watch Rushmore at some point. Steadily have fallen off with his films because I feel like he's prioritized his aesthetic, and his aesthetic is fantastic. Like, he's extremely good at set design. He's extremely good at direction and these minute details in his films. However, I haven't felt the heart in his films for quite a bit now. That could be me. That could be him. I'm not really sure. That's the reason that I don't run out to see his films the way that I used to.
Yeah, I'm sure Wes Anderson fans will find this as a return to form. I know a lot of people have said that. And that's the the way I perceived it. With the specific aesthetic that Wes Anderson is known for, I noticed how in this film, it seemed to be a vehicle that informed a lot more of the movie than it not really having a place. I would say The French Dispatch, it was so beautifully shot, and I noticed how beautifully it looked, and the production design is absolutely impeccable, but it didn't really mean anything. Where in this film, I feel there was a bit more of a bridge between the characters and the set design and the narrative as well.
Okay, that's good to hear. I'm happy to check it out. My number 8 is American Fiction. We just reviewed this film, so I don't think I need to go on and on about it. I just felt like it was such a wickedly sharp satire in a way I haven't seen in quite some time. I think it's neck to neck with Barbie for the funniest movie of the year. So richly observed, very humorous, cynical, grouchy, and had a big heart. It really has something for everybody. I know how cliche that sounds.
I completely agree. And since I haven't mentioned that film yet, there's probably a little bit more I'll have to say about that soon. But not yet, because I'm going to my number 7, which is Poor Things. In true Yorgos Lanthimos fashion, I do think he again made a film that was just so imaginative, unique, and visceral. It's a film that shows where a person's life can go if one follows their innate human instincts without shame, letting go of the stereotypes of what is considered proper in society, letting go of meaningless conversation and experiences in search of something much deeper and nuanced and satisfying. It's a film that's absolutely brimming with imagination, from the production design, which is immersive and detailed, and I might add some of the best of the entire year.
There's a great featurette, I forget who put it out, if it was Variety or whoever, but they basically take you on a tour of the sets, and they're just endless. You just walk around them the way you would walk around your house. It is just absolutely amazing.
I have to again mention, as I did in a review, that Emma Stone is a revelation in this movie. Her and Mark Ruffalo, I think, shine as a pair. They craft such intensely specific characters that I think drive plenty of laughs, but also enlighten as well.
From all of these wonderful things that Yorgos Lanthimos is putting together with all of his collaborators, I did feel like a little bit of his cynicism was watered down, and maybe some of his humor was elevated up. I'm not saying
it wasn't as tense.
I'm not saying
your tension
yeah.
list.
I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but films like Dogtooth that he made early in his career, and even The Lobster, just felt like such uniquely bracing pieces of work that I just missed it a little bit. My number 7 is a movie called The Killer, which is a movie that you hate. Is that correct?
I do not.
You said it. You said it was a really bad.
I'm gonna get some flack for this, but I thought it was quite a boring movie.
Okay, so I have a reaction to that. I remember that you said The Killer is one of those movies this year that you don't understand why people love it so much, and I actually think it's the opposite. I think it's a film that's so deceptively simple on the surface, but its subtext is so much fun. The first time I saw it, I watched it as a pure thriller. I was all caught up in its tension. I was so enamored with the craft and everything that was going on screen. The second time, I realized how funny the movie is, because Fassbender's character, he is observant, but he's a completely unreliable narrator. In a lot of ways, the film is about the fallacy of perfection, I think, and the main character's insistence that he has this rigorously detailed process in murdering somebody, but yet he continually just up. It has this subtext, this dramatic irony. I think it's really one of the funniest movies of the year once you tap into this weird, unreliable narrator synthesis with what's on screen. The sound design is absolutely perfect. I love the score. I think the score has this bizarre, atonal, abstract clanking that really freaks me out. I was listening to it when I was falling asleep once, and it jolted me awake because it was just clanking of metals. The way it uses non-diegetic sound versus diegetic sound to show perspective and toy with your expectations of what the violence is going to be, to move from a subjective perspective to an omniscient one, is just wild. Again, I think it's just a deceptively brilliant film. Oh, and that Tilda Swinton scene is one of the best scenes of the year.
I do find the Tilda Swinton scene to be one of my favorites of the movie. Well, it is my favorite scene in the movie. What can I say? So moving on, my number 6 film of the year is one that I know you're going to have to talk about eventually because you haven't mentioned it yet, and it's Oppenheimer. And I know you love that movie. So
it's not on my list.
What?
I'm just kidding.
Oh, I was going to be talk about the shock of the year.
It's on my list. Yeah.
Of course it is, no doubt. Anyways, Christopher Nolan has done something here that is so much more refined and elevated than so much of his previous work. He has crafted something here which is more thought-provoking than a lot of his other previous films on a more serious note, and something that has implications for the world because it's built in reality with this biopic that follows Oppenheimer, who had a hand in building the atomic bomb. From the set design, the practical effects. One of the things I remember, though, from watching this the first time was the pacing in this movie. It never slowed down, and I really loved it for that because biopics can sometimes feel like a slog, like you're trying to get through something. And this movie was exciting and thrilling, and it brought you from scene to scene with such a hectic pace. the clock was ticking down. Like the clock to the bomb dropping was ticking down.
I agree. I will talk more when I get there. My number 6 is a film called RMN. This is by Romanian filmmaker Christian Mungiu. He won the Palme d'Or, I think in 2007 for his film 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days. Extraordinary film. This film is really in a similar vein because it's this brooding drama exploring very prickly personal and political topics. And here, mainly the topic is immigration. The film is about a community's refusal to accept immigrant workers despite being a village of immigrants themselves. It very uniquely and elegantly portrays the common misconceptions that are associated with this issue. Something like, they're taking our jobs, they're dangerous, and it leads to some really unfortunate and harrowing sequences and difficult sequences to watch towards the end of the film that I haven't quite seen from him before. It has this mysterious kind of almost supernatural quality to the film. It's really on the margins of the story, and it's really interesting to contemplate both from a mood and a plot perspective. And it has one of my favorite endings of the year. It's an ending that works perfectly as a metaphor about being a stranger in a strange land. Also, even more interesting because it's in a way about nature's poetic justice, and that's all I'll really say. And this is the film I think I most regret you not seeing because it's such an interesting film, the way that it ends, that it would be perfect for this channel for us to talk about the ending for 25 minutes because it really leaves you with like a huh? But it's a good kind of huh. It's something that as you're walking out of the theater, you're like, oh, thematically, that is kind of interesting. You continue thinking about it throughout the year and develop these theories about it. So anyway, I was going to say this director is one to watch, but he won the Palme d'Or. So anyway, this director is somebody that when he puts out a film, you want to pay attention. I've seen all of his films and I adore all of them.
As much as you talked about this film, it is one of those movies that I have wished that I had already seen. So I just think it sounds extremely thought-provoking and relevant to today's world.
Yeah, certainly so. You're number 5, my sir.
My number 5. Do you want to take a guess?
Barbie?
You are right. That's funny. I think that's the first time we've done that.
It's funny. This movie is not my number 11, Barbie, but this was the movie, after we watched it, I had the hardest time leaving out of my top 10.
Yeah, we just watched this the other night, and what's funny is that I wanted to rewatch it because I hadn't seen it since it first came out, and you ended up just staying on the couch the whole time.
Yeah, I said I was going to go upstairs and read, and I ended up watching the whole movie with you because I forgot how good it was. It's just great. It really is.
Which says something for sure about the rewatchability of this film. I think what makes this such a rewatchable film is the amount of gags and jokes that are built into it. I thought this film was just filled with so much heart and laughter, and at the center, a core story about the fundamental meaning of our purpose in life, our purpose in the world, engaged with in a way that was so heartwarming and relatable, and also filled with a lot of melancholy as well. Particular part near the end, I didn't realize how much melancholy was built into that when Barbie is having this moment with the creator of Barbie, and she tells her, we live our lives and then we just die.
Yeah.
That's just kind of the end of her statement.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, in a way, it connects to Barbie's first joke in the film, which is whoever thinks about dying, right? I was catching jokes this time that I forgot were even there, or maybe I didn't notice the first time. It is so absolutely packed with just witty, brilliant social satire about gender and about everything in between all of the ideas that it's talking about. I was sitting at work the other day with my friend Justin, who I work with, and I was talking about how I was aggravated at the backlash to Barbie from some of the film community, particularly like the film community that I really respect, which is like these more like art house Criterion people, or the people that I listen to a lot seem to have really rejected Barbie. People like Kelly Reichardt. I love Kelly Reichardt, but like she was talking about how Barbie is more about marketing than it is about filmmaking, and that's not cinema, and etc. And I said something offhand that I just said, I can understand how somebody could say it's not cinema, but there's so much about it that's worth loving. And he just looked at me. He's like, how is that not cinema? And he was totally right. That movie is cinema. You know, Barbie is cinema. There is so much that went into the production design. There is so much that went into creating this world and writing this world from Noah Baumbach and Greta Gerwig that, of course, it's cinema. I reject the Criterion bros. I reject the thesis.
Yeah, and it's not like I'm about to go out and buy a Barbie anyways.
I bought a Ken.
You did?
No.
An Allen.
I didn't buy it. Yeah, I bought an Allen. Yeah, we have Allens. Okay, so my number 5 of the year is Passages, a film that you mentioned earlier. One of my favorite performances of the year from Franz Rogowski, who plays Tomas. Tomas is a charismatic but profoundly manipulative person who praises people who's close to him whenever it's advantageous to him, but then abandons them whenever he has a wandering eye. The film does a tremendous job, I think, of building characters and building relationships through movements of the hand or what is left unsaid. For just under 90 minutes, it's a really tight and dense film if you're paying attention to it, and it acutely captures the feeling of falling in and out of love with somebody who, frankly, is very bad for you. We've raved about the ending of the film. It's a bike sequence where just behind Tomas's eyes, you can see that maybe he recognizes what he's doing to people, even if he'll never truly admit it to himself. But he just keeps biking in circles on this cyclical nature of narcissism that he's going to be in probably for his entire life. And it echoes Ira Sachs' earlier film, Love is Strange, which ends with another bicycle sequence that's in this golden light from Brooklyn. And you can only feel that good things are ahead for those characters in Love is Strange at the end of that film. And you can only feel quite the opposite, I think, for Tomas in this film. But I just thought it was such an interesting character piece and one of my favorite queer movies of the year.
So going from there, my number 4 movie of the year is The Zone of Interest.
Was May December not on your list at all?
No.
Wow, you piece of Anyway, sorry.
Wow, way to just get off the subject of my number 4.
Sorry, number 4, Zone of Interest, it should be higher.
I will say I have the utmost respect for this movie. I would say from an objective sense, it is one of the best crafted movies in maybe the past decade. Mm-hmm. It's a film that I could best describe as intense. From the intense nature of the subject matter to the intensity in which the production design, sound design, and the characters all feed off one another. It's a film that's imagery pierces into the brain and lingers so long after it's been watched. It's harrowing and constantly and indirectly asks the question, what does today's world have in common with the horrors of our past and the complicity we engage with in our daily lives?
Yes. Yes. I'm gonna have some stuff to say about in a very short time. My number 4 is May December. I found this to be a complex character portrait of a master manipulator, of an imitator, and a repressed adult looking for his lost childhood. It's a film that carries some campy aesthetics, but I think the final half hour of the film is actually pretty harrowing and pretty emotional. I think what I liked most about it is I think Todd Haynes took a very nuanced approach to the subject matter. It lets us settle into these themes and into these characters and lets us make our own decisions about them. Some of the discourse around this film was outraged that it didn't punish or moralize Julianne Moore's character. And I'm not trying to say that what she did was okay in any regard, but I'm not sure any film is ever made better by moralizing at us and telling us exactly what's on its mind. I think it's a much better conversation piece to present these complex ideas and let the audience decide their moral standing. You can be absolutely outraged at Julianne Moore's character and still think that this is a good film. Great performances, very intricate themes, psychologically complex character motivations, no answers to questions. It's about everything I look for in movies.
I love that that movie is a conversational piece. There's something you could discuss afterwards about these characters and what they mean to each other and the morality of them in general.
Yeah, I mean, the film is complex. Charles Melton's character to Natalie Portman's character says at one point, I wanted it. And that's a complex thing. And then he says to Julianne Moore later in the film that the responsibility shouldn't be on him because he was a child. And both of those things are true at once. I mean, if anyone wants my perspective, I truly believe he was a victim. And I truly believe that Julianne Moore was a predator, even if she doesn't believe that she is.
If you don't come away from that movie and recognize those things, then
what's wrong with your morality?
Exactly. Going from there into my number 3, it's American Fiction, which you just talked in depth about. We have the review.
Number 3?
Number 3.
Holy wow,
and
that's awesome.
I don't want to say it's too much about recency bias, but as we were watching this film, the most I can add to what you had said was that this was one of those movies I was waiting for this year. I'm all about the types of movies that blend so well the cinematography and the characters and the heart, the warmth and the humor and all those things. I loved everything about it. It was just one of those movies I was in the theater. I was like, I was waiting for this.
Yeah.
And it just served it to me on a wonderful platter of
grouchy publishing cynicism.
Yes.
I think you're right, because when I was watching this film, I had this euphoric feeling where I was watching something that was so funny, but so biting and so sharp and frankly kind of adventurous and maybe even a little dangerous with its humor. It's something that I could see someone being offended by, but also something that I thought was very appropriate for where we are at our times. Kind of like you said, it just felt like something I was waiting for this year. I was really glad that we saw this before our list. My number 3 is Oppenheimer. I almost feel like in another year, this would be my number 1 film. It's a film that's so organically composed and so scattered, but all of the pieces fit together so effectively and so beautifully as part of the whole that I really can't imagine what the planning process looks like. So that tells you that it was planned perfectly simply because you can't tell where the origin of the idea was. I surely think this is Nolan's best directed feature. It's so densely written. It's densely constructed with the kind of moral heft of like an Asghar Farhadi movie. The fact that it's a film about quantum physics and a troubled mind, it's like a 3-hour horse race of relentless speed and tension. It's insanity. I was even more impressed in the way that it uses motif through imagery and sound, particularly the stomping feet throughout the film and also the raindrops. So that's the first shot and one of the last shots of the film. It also shows up as expressionistic flourish on some tables throughout the film. I think it's rare that a film this exciting, this intense, this nuanced in both its characters and its ideas, as well filmed, well edited, and well written as it is simply the total package and somehow makes a lot of money. It takes some real risks with its structure, and the audience was with it the entire time. That gives me more faith in the future of moviegoing than anything that happened this year.
So before I mention my number 2 film of the year, I do want to say I was so torn between 2 and 1.
I absolutely agonized about my 2 and 1.
It was so agonizing to put which in either position. I'm just going to say my number 2 film of the year was Anatomy of a Fall. So we do have a review on Anatomy of a Fall, which I recommend going to watch. This film just held my attention from beginning to end. Harrowing, funny, portrait.
Tense?
Certainly.
Portrait.
Certainly tense. That's right.
Yeah.
Surprised it's not on your top 10 list if it was so tense.
I didn't find it as tense as you.
That is true. But it was just such a tense portrait of what is like going through being accused of murder and how that evolves when it becomes such a public trial.
Yeah, it's actually very interesting because we've talked about satire a lot in our top 10, and this film is almost like if satire was serious. It's exaggerating our sensibilities for true crime just a little bit, but it's doing it in a very potent, very intense, very compelling drama. And also our favorite dog performance of the year. Close second would be Aki Kaurismäki's dog in Fallen Leaves. But great dog performance and extraordinary child performance. And Sandra Huller.
The
best actress.
The best of it all.
The best actress category is absolutely stacked.
Oh, we just lost that light.
The best actress category is absolutely stacked. I'm certain she'll be nominated, but it's an extraordinary performance.
If she is not nominated, it will be a crime.
Speaking of Sandra Huller, my number 2 is The Zone of Interest. I very much agonized over my 1 and 2, and I'm almost thinking that The Zone of Interest would have been my number 1 if I had the opportunity to see it again. We saw it once at the New York Film Festival. I really wish I was able to see it again, but it's not playing around us yet. I think it's a film that will probably unlock a lot more meaning on a second round, because the first time I watched it, it was more like an anti-drama that had a very cumulative, very intense effect at the end of the film. And a lot of the images haven't left my brain since I've seen it. I almost feel like I could replay the whole film in my brain. Jonathan Glazer has made 4 feature films, and he approaches every genre like it's a convention worth completely abandoning, right? He's made a gangster film. He's made like a weird Eyes Wide Shut type love art film. He's made an alien film, and he's made a Holocaust film. Every single time, he's taken the conventions of those genres and he's utterly ripped them apart and made something that I didn't even know was possible in those genres. What haunts me really about this film is its meditation on complicity. We have an avant-garde film here that uses abstract filmmaking to convey a universal theme, and one of the most timely themes of the year, certainly. I've thought about this film every time I made an expensive pour-over coffee while thousands die in Gaza. I thought about this film every time I say to myself, I deserve an expensive bottle of wine, while half the world doesn't even have clean drinking water. It asks what you have in common with the perpetrator of a crime, which frankly, in the Western world, we're always closer to a perpetrator than we are a victim. And it asks us, what is waiting in the dark of the tunnel of history versus the brightly clean, sanitized light of a museum. It's a masterwork. I really can't wait for a second viewing. It's just an utterly transfixing and affecting film.
But I know for sure your number 1 is something you have to constantly scream to the void because not as many people have seen it.
Yes. My number 1 is Pacifiction. I tweeted earlier today that I feel like my future might be me in a straitjacket screaming about Pacifiction to people on the street while I'm being restrained by the police. Pacifiction, I think, is just an extraordinary film. It's a film about colonialism. It's a film about politics and the way that politics can have either a coldness or maybe even an outright disdain for its citizens, in more that people care about talking about and expanding their worth in politics than actually doing their job in politics. It's a film that's also about nuclear threats. It's a film that's also about ambiguous sexuality. It's a film that's also about the troubling undercurrent beneath paradise and what goes into making paradise. It's filmed absolutely lushly. I don't know.
Oh, I like that word, luscious. It's a very luscious film.
It is a very luscious film. I think one of the reasons, and you know, maybe the audience can see me struggling a bit for words here, one of the reasons I love Pacifiction so much is because I can't really describe it. Even I've seen it 6 times, and there's still times that I can't really put my finger on why it's so special. Of all the people I've screamed at about Pacifiction, I have had 2 friends that have watched it. One loved it, one didn't like it at all. The friend that liked it, I asked him, I was like, what is so great about Pacifiction? And he sent me something that was interesting, but still just didn't feel like it captured really what it was about. I apologize if this seems really vague, but I think Pacifiction is a very special film. And I think it's a film that certainly needs to be experienced much more so than it needs to be intellectualized. Watch our review if you're curious about more thoughts on Pacifiction.
We don't have a review.
Yes, we do.
Oh, we do. We did the review. That's
yeah,
right.
Our review on Pacifiction is our worst watch review of the year, so please go watch it.
I forgot we reviewed that movie. I have to go watch that review again.
Yeah, it's a great review.
Yeah.
You on the movie the whole time.
That is not true.
Yeah, why don't you like Pacifiction?
That's not true. It's not that I don't like it.
Number one is
It's-
Pacifiction.
Yes, my number one is Pacifiction. I've been holding it back from you this entire time.
I can't wait to know what your number one is. I don't know what it is.
Oh, it's Past Lives.
That makes sense. That was on my honorable mention.
That was on your honorable mentions, and it made my number one film of the year. I thought this movie really just encapsulated everything that I love about film. From grounded and realistic character portraits all the way to the gorgeous cinematography, I found Past Lives to be paced with such ease and care, building a story of longing for what could have been of our past selves, and coming to terms with the reality of what is the present self. Some of the most thought-provoking moments in this film come down to the simple question of what if I was or wasn't present in this specific time and place, and what would that mean for myself or for us? I didn't get the chance to talk about this in our review because I didn't notice it on the first watch, but it has to do with the subtle shot composition in this movie, which I thought was just absolutely insane on a second watch.
I agree with you, by the way. We watched this again together, and I was so struck by the direction in this film.
So in terms of that shot composition, our main characters, Nora and Haesung, they're frequently separated by this barrier. First, this begins literally by land as they live halfway across the globe from each other, and also through spotty internet connections as they are in 12 years later talking through Skype. But once they meet in person, I noticed that there were all these physical barriers between them subtly in all these shots, whether it be a pole on the train that's situated right directly in between them, a handrail in which they're walking each on opposite sides of, or an actual physical crack in the ground between two slabs of pavement in which each of them are standing on their own slab of pavement. I feel like the writing was on the wall from the very beginning of this movie with regards to their relationship. And our journey in the film is really seeing how Nora and Haesung come to terms with what could have been but never will. And one of my favorite things about this film is that it's a film filled with good intentions and the coping skills of emotionally mature adults.
Very well said.
And that is it for our top 10 films of 2023. Let us know in the comments, what were your favorite films of the year? As always, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.